Thank you, and thank you for the information with regard to Native American. I'd like to remind you all that the Ballona Wetlands site is a registered sacred site. Tatton, which is the Tongva ancestral nation. Please, Billy, if you could run my videotape. This is going to be a tape showing you and reminding you of some of the things that we have learned about Ballona and what we came here to thank you for with regard to the illegal drains that were on Ballona that the Coastal Commission had sealed. And I will be bringing you up to date on that with regard to, you had asked for both good news for you and bad news. The video will be showing the drainage that is occurring on Ballona Wetlands right now. This has been going on every day during the rainy season that we have. This is all just taking the water from the freshwater marsh and sending it all out into the ocean via the Ballona Channel. The good news that I'm about to show you is that this is the freshwater marsh, and I would like to say thank you so much, Coastal Commissioners, for stopping the drainage through those illegal drains, for restoring the rainwater ponding that is north of Jefferson, and together we can stop all of the freshwater drainage of the Ballona Wetlands. This is the area where one of the cap drains is, and you can see that it is ponding up, something which the Department of Fish and Wildlife told you that could never occur unless it came from the freshwater marsh, which there's the freshwater marsh, and no, it's not from the freshwater marsh, it's from the drains, or it's from the rainfall now that the drain is capped. This slide shows you all of the ponding that is happening all across Ballona now, because in those areas where the drains are capped. And I'll go back here and you can see to the right where the two little red circles are at the top are the two capped drains. That whole area is now ponding with all of this fresh water, and you have the birds utilizing it as you see in these photographs right there. This is also an area that the private business, the Bay Foundation, and the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission were a part of creating the DEIR for Playa Vista. This area was not included. They know full well of it. I showed you the email correspondence, even discussing the what I believe is a Clean Water Act violation, because the water from the channel backs up into those drains, and it did, and released tide water into the Ballona Wetlands for the past 20 years. None of this is in the DEIR. Ms. Luce was aware of this and never addressed this issue. And ultimately, I would like to see that Ms. Luce be recused from anything having to do with Ballona Wetlands, and we'll get to that later. To move on, there's the drain that you just saw in the video, and the area there with the little blue is the outflow area where all of this water could and should be going to Ballona Wetlands. This is not about paying for more water. This is simply putting the water where it was supposed to go all along. The CDP 5-91-463 never allowed for this freshwater marsh system to harm Ballona. And in fact, as I agree with Enforcement's Lisa Hagee, putting a drain in a wetland is exactly the opposite of something you would do. And all of this water is being diverted and thrown away out into the ocean. And here you can see the drain there at the top, the water in the marsh, and the water to the left, which is the overflow area designed for the overflow, that is dry there because it's being diverted through that drain out to the ocean. The other thing I'd like to talk to you about is the bad news. The drains. By the way, Commissioner Peskin, you had brought up concerns with regard to the Native Americans, and I would like to let you know that Tatton, which is the Native American John Tommy Rosas, who is the authority for the site, I will tell you again on item 5 what Tatton stands for. It's the tribal authority that he represents. And they agree with Grassroots Coalition that the CDP process for the removal of the drains is something with which he agrees to have happen. regarding what happened with regard to staff's language in the CDP, staff usurped the authority of the commission by altering the decision made by the commissioners in 2017 to remove those drains. And several of you, Commissioner Brownsey, Commissioner Peskin, were concerned that perhaps you should have added other language. But a CDP is the same as CEQA. That means that, like CEQA, a CDP requires consideration of alternatives. They have to be analyzed. That's a given. So the language that you provided in 2017 stating to remove those drains, provide an application to remove those drains in 6 months, already came with the given fact that there would be alternatives provided.
And Billy, if you could stop that now.
Has set horrible precedents
Go ahead and
for
close
this
it.
commission. From here on out, we will never know if...
And I would like to give you an update on what is going on with that, because the commissioners did ask for the removal of the drains to be a part of that application. Grassroots Coalition did have to file a notice of intent to sue, to which staff has told you that they capitulated with turning back the language to what the commissioners actually said. That information went out to Department of Fish and Wildlife, who has now put out an application that staff has approved as complete for the removal of those drains. The only problem with that is that the Department of Fish and Wildlife is now specifically stating it is only with their restoration plan. They are diametrically opposed to what the commissioners said at the time to not attach this to the restoration plan, which still we're looking at years away. I provided for you also up there a press release from Grassroots Coalition that I'd like you to have a look at. I also provided you the Sierra Club newsletter that just went out, so please take your time and have a look at that sometime today. I also provided you with the Coastal Commission's own ruling from enforcement with regard to the harm that's already been done to Ballona's hydrology and flora and fauna due to those illegal drains. And I'd like to let you know that the press release has to do with Grassroots Coalition suing the Department of Fish and Wildlife. 2 lawsuits, which they had failed to give us documentation for the past year. They capitulated immediately. We have prevailed in that lawsuit, and they are now coughing up documents. The problem with this and why it is so difficult to speak about is that, and granted, these are attorneys speaking, they are discussing that ponding that I showed you as being not beneficial to Ballona. They are discussing hiding behind the language of public trust lands that I have brought before you before, saying that the CDFW is not protecting the public trust lands. And they are hiding behind that language, saying that we can only deal with the removal of those drains during the restoration because we do not want to harm Ballona. Well, I would submit that they have been ongoing harming Ballona all of these years through those illegal drains, through the diversion of that water that goes into the marsh with a clay liner. As a result of our PRAs, we know for sure that the Department of Fish and Wildlife believes itself to be a board member of Playa Vista's private business known as the Ballona Wetlands Conservancy. I believe this to be a tremendous conflict of interest. Number one, what I provided to you with the green cover here shows you what the mission statement is for the Ballona Wetlands Conservancy. Preservation and maintenance of environmentally sensitive coastal wetlands. That would be nice. The last one there, the key part, Ballona Wetlands represents one of the last large freshwater coastal wetlands and ecosystems in LA County, California. Now, all of the things that I have brought to you from CDP 5-91-463 and the settlement with the Coastal Commission back in 1990 all discusses not harming Ballona wetlands.
albeit it had the terminology label, mislabeling of salt marsh because of it. At the time, they were fast-tracking this lawsuit, trying to protect lands. But we know that the area is predominantly seasonal freshwater wetland. We know that because, as you've seen, we have multiple underlying freshwater aquifers that are classified by the Water Board as potential drinking water and are legally classified as drinking water. We also know that because there's a Prop 65 lawsuit that came as a result of Grassroots Coalition's litigation with SoCalGas, that a Prop 65 regarding water was prevailed, and part of the response in the settlement agreement is that SoCalGas, if that water quality changes, they will no longer have to remediate to drinking water standards. Now, if you dig out that land, you are changing it to salt water, and they will not have to remediate to drinking water standards. So here we're seeing conflict of interest on who's promoting these plans. Now, as far as Fish and Wildlife is concerned, let's go back in time and think about what has happened with Fish and Wildlife. They provided the Ballona Wetlands Conservancy with a streambed alteration violation. Playa Vista, this Ballona Conservancy, built a huge, massive illegal road that fell down into the riparian corridor. They were given citations by Vector Control for not managing properly, and we had a major mosquito outbreak during which Vector Control said, I'm going to take over this. Well, of course, Fish and Wildlife didn't want that. U.S. Fish and Wildlife didn't want that because this is supposed to be a protected area. But the Ballona Conservancy, through it has a cleanup and abatement order for cleanup of the Howard Hughes contamination. Well, the Water Board is taking that water, putting it into the riparian corridor, and even with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Corps, the original plan on all of this was to let it spread out into Ballona, when in fact what they are doing is shunting it out into the ocean via that main drain that also has no permit to allow water to back up into it. I'm out of time, and I will speak with you more about this later.
Thank you very
you.
much.